How's it going, everybody? My name is John Bianchi, and we're going to be getting into the Airbnb Data Basics. This entire free course is going to walk you through the basics of Airbnb data, naturally, right? So this course is obviously for somebody who is just getting started and you want to get an Airbnb or start an Airbnb business or rental arbitrage business, whatever it is that you want to get doing. You realize that the data is actually really important, and a lot of people have been telling you to learn about the data, and you realize that you should probably start off with the basics of data before actually going any deeper, right? And if you're not that person and you already have a whole bunch of properties, you already know how freaking important the data is when it comes to Airbnb. And that's why you're here and you're like, I just want to learn absolutely everything I can because I don't want to make a mistake or another mistake or whatever it might be, right? So we're going to start off with the basics of data. And then once you understand these core fundamental understandings of the data, you can then learn how to utilize it to find profitable properties, okay? Now, a little bit about me. My name is John Bianchi. I'm the Airbnb data guy. I have a Airbnb data consulting business where I help people find profitable Airbnbs. I have one client where I've helped them find 140 properties over the last 2 years, and every single last property is a cash flow positive property, which to me is 100% success rate. And there is technically nobody else out there with a better track record than me, and I give all of that credit to my understanding of Airbnb data, all right? And I have compiled all of this information for free for you to go through, and I do this because I want to build trust within the Airbnb community so that if you decide to hire us to find you a property, you know that we know what we're doing, okay? So that's the idea of why I'm giving it away for free. Now, let's actually go through what you're going to get in this course, okay? We're going to start off with the very first video, which is going to be how is the data collected? So understanding the algorithm that these different softwares are using to be able to display the data to you, the fundamental algorithm behind it. I just find it super useful to logically understand what's going on behind the scenes, because then it makes it easier to be able to spot good and bad data, all right? Then you're going to get into, how can data be trusted? What makes something good data and what makes something bad data? This is the core of understanding Airbnb data basics, because a lot of the data out there, like 80% of it, is bad data. I call it bad data. It's technically just useless data. It's information that you can't use to make a decision. Therefore, it's not useful. All right. And you're going to learn all of that within the first 4 videos. Then from there, you're going to have a simple, video here. It's going to tell you how to track good versus bad data. Then we're going to talk about local knowledge, why local knowledge is a type of data that is very, very important to be able to gather, and how to go out and actually do that. All right. The next one's going to be saturation. Is your market saturated or not? Right. That's a very hot topic right now that people are concerned about, that every single one of these markets is saturated just because they have 10,000 listings, which if you learn how to do this, you'll understand that that's actually not that big of a deal. All right. Then we're going to get into splitting up raw data by bedroom count. This is more of like a technical thing of how to do it. We're going to talk about the expenses that you would experience with an Airbnb and how to figure those out. There's a tutorial of how to use Google Maps, which essentially just helps you plot all the data. And then if I were to click show more here at the very end of the video, there is a live video of me actually marking good versus bad data, so you can kind of see what it looks like to go through that. All right. So most of you are probably looking at this watching this on YouTube, and you're probably thinking to yourself, like, what is this? You know what I mean? Like, what is this additional site where I can see all these videos? Well, I've actually compiled my entire Airbnb data course for free on my website, so you can go through it one by one. It actually will track your progress, where you are. You can come back and forth if you wanted to go into that. So if you don't want to watch it on YouTube, you can simply just go over to STR Search and strsearch.com. You can, the links below in the description there, and then you can go to where it says free courses, and you can sign up 100% for free, right? And if you were to do that, you're actually going to see that you're going to get a ton of additional courses. There's the Bianchi method, the Airbnb data, the Airbnb starter pack, the Airbnb data basics, the profit map masterclass, so on and so forth. All of these courses are extraordinarily helpful, but the Bianchi method is without a doubt the greatest Airbnb data course that exists anywhere, all right? And I'm just simply letting you know that it exists, and it's 100% free. Once again, I give away all of the process of how to do everything so that I can build trust within the Airbnb community, so that you guys understand that that I know what I'm doing, right? And then if you decide to hire us to actually find you a property, you trust us that we're going to do a good job for you, all right? Or if you know somebody else, you can reach out to them, let them know. So that is the essence of the Airbnb data basics. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, sign up here if you want, but the only thing that I ask, not even like and subscribe, okay? That's it. That's, if you want to do that, go for it. But what I really, really ask here is that I have compiled the greatest resource for Airbnb data, and there are so many Facebook groups out there that talk about giving away free information. Well, I have the best information, and if I post it in any of those Facebook groups, they're actually just going to delete it because they're going to see it as self-promotion. But I really want to get all this information to as many people as possible, and Facebook groups are the best place to do that. So my only ask is if you find all this content useful for you, or if you go and sign up for all my other free courses and you find that content useful, please just share this with everybody else. Share the Bianchi method with everybody else through Facebook groups so that they can get this information and they can stop buying unprofitable properties. That's our entire objective with this business, is to ensure that nobody buys an unprofitable property again. All right? That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to let you get to it. Enjoy this course and share it with as many people as you can. Appreciate you guys. How's it going, everybody? For this video, what I'm going to explain is how the algorithm works to be able to track all of the data that you are going to be working with, just so you have an understanding of how everything works, okay? I find it to be very useful for myself, and I think you guys might find that useful as well. So understanding that there is an algorithm, which is just a software program that is written that allows us to be able to record everything that we see on an Airbnb listing on a daily basis. And so the algorithm will come in and it will record what the title is, how many reviews there are, the star rating, every little last piece of detail that you could possibly imagine is being recorded from each individual listing. And if you were to be in one of the profit maps and you were to be looking at what's referred to as sheet 1, you would see that there is a ton of data that is tracked about every single last detail of all these different properties. However, to me, what I think is one of the most important things out of all of this, and what I truly want you to understand, is the revenue column that we have here. So the annualized revenue, if I go to simple data tab, you can see there's the annualized revenue, and this number here is the one that's obviously the most important. Title is not going to make or break what you decide to do. Number of views, none of these things is really going to make or break, and they're very easy to record. But the annual revenue is the number that matters the most, and so I want to explain and break that one down, okay? The way that it works is, again, the algorithm is going into every single listing on a daily basis, and it goes to the calendar. And when it's at the calendar, what it's doing is it's recording how much, what the nightly rate is for every single day that is available. So let's hypothetically imagine that every single day here you could see would be available, okay? Because it would start recording on the very first day that the listing was posted. So let's assume that every single one of these is available. Well, if every single one of these was also available for $100 a night, it would record that. It would come in and record that every single one was up for $100 a night, and its cleaning fee was $50. And then the next day, what it's going to do is it's going to come back and see if any of those dates got booked out. And so let's hypothetically assume that the 16th, just that one night, got booked out. Well, what it sees is that this day is no longer available. And the night before, it knows that it recorded it for $100. And now it comes back today and it's blocked out. Therefore, it knows that it most likely got booked for $100. And there would have been a cleaning fee with that. So therefore, it got booked out for $100 for the nightly rate and $50 for the cleaning fee, making it $150 booking. Okay. And it would record how much the nightly rate was, how much the cleaning fee was, and the fact that it was a turnover. Okay. So it would record all of those different things. And then what it's going to do is the same thing again. It's going to record all of the other prices, make sure nothing has changed there. And then it's going to come back the next day and see if anybody got booked any of these days, right? And it's going to continue to do this over and over and over and over again, day in and day out. And then after a certain time period, over 274 days, we are then going to be able to have a generally good idea as to how much that property is going to make throughout the entire year, okay? So as an example, if I have the simple data up that you can see here, you can see this column right here, column Q. This one is telling us how many days that this listing has actually been up and being recorded. So you can see the very first one has been recorded for 365 days, which means the algorithm has recorded the entire listing, including the calendar, every single day for 365 days. Whereas this one has only been recorded for 274 days. And it's important to stress these two, okay? Because the annualized revenue number that we have here is annualized, which means that it's stretched out to the entire year so that we're looking at a full year revenue for each individual property. Now, this first one and the second one, we know have been tracked for 365 days because we can see that there. Now, and so the number that we're seeing is fully based off of a full year's revenue. Whereas this last one is only 274 days. So it's actually missing the last 3 months. However, we have an annualized revenue. How is that, right? And what we do is we take the annual occupancy times by the average daily rate. So, and then we times those two by 365. And then we also add in what the cleaning revenue would have been during that time frame as well. And then that's how we get the annualized revenue for a property that has not been around for the entire year. I can't stress enough how important it is for us to do this, because when you're looking at all these properties, you need to be comparing them apples to apples. If this property had 3 months less of data and revenue to be showing here, it would be showing like it was doing way down here. And then the reality is that listing is probably significantly nicer than all of these listings down here. And you'd be confused as to why it wouldn't be making nearly as much as it should have been. And it's just simply because it was missing 3 months of its revenue, right? And so by annualizing it, we get the full year revenue. And that makes it significantly better when you're analyzing all this data side by side. And I know that's not like a perfect logic, because we don't know for a fact that their occupancy and their average daily rate is going to be the same for the last 3 months. But I've been doing this long enough, and I know that it's close enough and it works. Okay. And I've got tons of proof that it does work. And so to summarize, okay, the algorithm, again, there's an algorithm that goes into every single listing every single day and records the calendars, records their nightly rates, and sees if they're getting booked on a daily basis. And if they are, it records how much they think they made based off of how much they were priced the night before. And then that they do this day in and day out until we can get an almost full year's worth of revenue. And that is how the algorithm works to be able to give us that annualized revenue number. Okay. I hope that makes sense. It's important to know, and it's important to know that it's actually a good number and a useful number to be using for your analysis moving forward. Okay. I'll talk to you guys later. See you in the next video. How's it going, everybody? I want to just talk to you quickly about the reliability of the data. Can you trust the numbers that you're seeing in there? Are they actually accurate? How accurate are they? All these different little scenarios. And the reality is that the data is not 100% accurate across the board. There's going to be some properties that are going to be spot on. There's going to be some that are definitely wrong, like without a doubt. And there's going to be some that have a variance from their true revenue number of anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30%. And that's just the reality of scraping data. You never truly know exactly how much the property is actually making, but you're getting a fairly close prediction. Now, what do you do about that, right? Like, so you might be thinking to yourself, like, well, that's pretty scary. That's pretty insane. Like, I'm kind of nervous now about using this data to make a prediction. And I can understand that, right? However, with that being said, you're going to learn the entire process that I'm going to be teaching you, which is going to show you how you can work with the fact that it's not perfect, okay? And still get the right answer. And I'm going to prove that right now. So I'm going to show you this sheet, which is TechFester's actual data from properties that we have had live for a variety of times. So you can see some have been around for over 500 days. Some have been around for almost 300 days. There's a variety of homes that have been around within that time frame. There's even more within there as well, but I'm just showing the ones that we have enough data collected on to be able to actually give a true number. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because what I'm going to explain after this will prove that that it actually works, okay? So I have been predicting how much I thought that each individual property that TechFester was going to purchase, how much it was actually going to make. And so then therefore, now that we've had the properties up and running and I have predictions out there, I say, hey, this property is going to make $100,000. And then we manage it for the entire year, I can figure out how accurate or how close I was to that actual prediction. And if you look at this column right here, which is the percentage of performa, you can see that it shows how close I was to actually getting it right. And what you'll notice is I'm very conservative. And so if I say a property was going to make $100,000, what this is telling you here is that the property actually made $123,000. And so then therefore I was 23% below what it actually ended up doing. And if you were to review all of these properties and go through every single last one of them, you would notice that I'm off by 25% conservatively, which I am totally okay with. Being off by 25%, but being conservative by 25% means that we're doing a really good job, right? So based off all the data I was reviewing, I thought we'd make $100,000. We ended up making $125,000. Nobody's mad because the property worked at $100,000. And everything above that is just gravy on top, right? It's a cherry on top of everything else. And so then therefore it works out. And so as you can see, most of these, this is the worst one that you can see here is 88%. That's still only off by 12%. But everything else is almost either really accurate, or some properties are, off by quite a bit, but we just did really, really well with those properties. What I'm trying to say is that, again, how do you trust the data? And I'm saying you can't just solely trust one piece of data. You can't. But what you can do is you can take a collective of data. So in other words, you can take a good grouping of data, and then you can make an educated decision based off of that. And you can also find patterns within the data that help it become more reliable and more believable. And so in other words, what ends up happening, right, is if you have this grouping of data right here, and let's actually go from 40 to 30, okay? So we've got this many properties right here that are roughly all doing about $30,000 a year. I can guarantee you some of these are 100% accurate, some are a little bit above, some are a little bit below. But what happens is when you go through all of these, you will be able to see that these ones up here should look better, be bigger, be better properties, have better photos, have more amenities, whatever it is that's allowing them to do better than the ones that are down here. It'll make logical sense as you're going through the data. You can see the patterns of why one property would be making more than the other. And then what will happen, and I guarantee this will happen, is you will go through and one of the properties makes no sense. So let's say it's this one right here. This one looks way worse than all the rest. It is a worse building. It's got worse photos. It's got worse design. And you can't logically make sense as to why this property would be making as much as the rest of these properties here. It just doesn't add up, right? And the reality is that's a bad piece of data, even though it looks like it's a good piece of data. In other words, it passed our is it bad data test. It passed it. However, there's still something wrong with it. And that would be the algorithm screwing up how much that property actually ended up making. And so what I'm trying to point out here is that you cannot rely on one piece of data. You have to review a good chunk of data within a certain area and then see the trend of those properties and be able to logically and reasonably understand why one would be making more than the other to be able to trust all of them. And when you do that, then you can trust the data. Then you can know, okay, this is very clear pattern. This one, these 5 very clearly are doing better than these 5 for X, Y, and Z reasons. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense that they'd be making more. And then the same thing happens with these ones. It's very clear why they're making so much more. And so then you start to be able to believe the numbers that you're looking at more and more and more. And you go, okay, this makes sense. I can trust the number that I'm looking at here. And I believe that it's actually going to work out. And then if you're like me, you don't assume that you're just going to make the top amount like everybody else is. Even if your property is extremely comparable, you still bring it down a little bit and say, hey, we're probably going to make, let's say we make 25% less, right, than what we think it's actually going to end up making. And if it makes 25% more, then everybody's really happy, right? But that's the general idea when it comes to, hey, can I trust the number that I'm seeing here? And the reality is, no, you can't trust just one piece of data. You have to have a good grouping of data to be able to fully know if it's going to be right or wrong. Okay. I can't stress that enough. I hope that was helpful. Hope that makes sense. Hope that wasn't too confusing. But the reality is that if you follow the process, you follow the data, you follow what I'm talking about over all this, it will work out. And I just proved to you that it does. Okay. So I'll see you in the next video. How's it going, everybody? So what I'm going to explain to you is what makes data good. Okay. There's obviously good data. There's bad data. There's completely useless data. To be honest, anything useless to me is bad data. So I want to first start off with good data. What makes something good data? We can get into the bad later. So there's 2 main requirements for good data. We need a Airbnb that has been managed full-time by an Airbnb host for almost an entire year. And we need the algorithm to actually have tracked it during that entire time frame. So we know that the algorithm records the calendars on a daily basis, okay? So as long as the calendar has been recorded for 274 days, we can take that information and figure out with a pretty close estimate exactly how much it's going to make over the full year, right? Over those 365 days. Whereas if a listing had only been tracked for 30 days and we took those, the amount that made during those 30 days and tried to times it by 12, that number would be way off for how much they would make over the full year because of the seasonality of short-term rentals. Some months they would have been making way more or way less. And depending on whatever month that we recorded, it would just really screw up what the annualized revenue would be. Therefore, if a listing has been recorded and tracked for 274 days, it almost is a full year and we can figure out exactly what the annualized revenue number is. However, not only do we need the algorithm to be tracking the listing during that entire time frame, we also need the host to be a full-time host. And they don't even need to be a good host. They just have to be a host. They have to have not got their listing paused or paused their listing during that entire time frame. And then we can have a true good data. Okay, so by them hosting it and managing it the entire time frame, we know that they're actually getting it booked on a regular basis. There's actually people showing up. They're not just blocking off the calendar or only renting it out on weekends, right? They're a full-time host, not a part-time host. And so when we have those two things, that's when we know we have good data. And I'll get into the different ways that we are going to be able to figure those two things out. But essentially, when you have those two, you have good data. Anything else is bad data. It's not useful. You can't make good decisions based off of it. There's data scientists that can do things with it that are very helpful. But for you who's going to be using this data to be able to buy a property, you want to make sure that you're only looking at this good data and just ignore everything else. Now, the beautiful thing about it is that when I build these profit maps and when you receive them, they have the vast majority of the bad data already removed. So as an example, if I were to scroll down here, okay, and I were to slide over, this tells me how many listings that we're actually looking at for Chicago. So in my profit map, we have 1,592 listings that made it through as good data. Okay, they met the first two requirements. Whereas if you were to look on AirDNA, they're showing you that there's 7,221 active rentals, and they're showing you all of them, which means that the vast majority of this data that you see here, about 80 to 90% of that, is not useful data that you can use to make a decision, which is one of my favorite things about the entire profit map, is that you're basically only looking at good data. Now, again, it's not 100% all good. There's still some bad data in here that we need to remove, but we've gotten rid of a really large chunk of it for you. And so you have just, good data that you'd be looking at. Okay. And then in the next video, we're going to get into bad data and how to spot bad data and how to remove that. Okay. But now you understand what good data is, and we'll see you in the next video. How's it going, everybody? So what we're going to be covering here is bad data. Now, some of you might have already seen this video on YouTube for free, because I've had this out here for a very, very long time talking about bad data. But I'm going to be covering a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit different. So there's a couple of things in here that might be useful for those of you who want to rewatch it. However, if you already understand good data and bad data, you don't necessarily need to fully watch this, okay? With that being said, the next video that I'm going to do will be a lot of details of how I track and record data nowadays, good and bad data, that makes it significantly more efficient and effective in comparison to the way that I have originally taught it with the color coding. So if you want to see the differences with that, please watch the next video. But as for this video, we are going to be getting into a lot of the same good and bad data scenarios that we've been through before. So without further ado, let's get into it. So bad data, okay? Again, bad data is anything that doesn't meet the two requirements that we talked about, which means that it's been tracked for less than the 274 days, and it's not a full-time host. Now, there's some other things as well that make bad data, and we're going to be getting into those. But I'm going to start off with some of the main things. And the way that this is written out doesn't perfectly make sense. So I'm going to explain each point by point, okay? So the first one is entire home. Now, when you're on Airbnb, you can rent out your entire home. You can rent out your bedroom, and you can also rent out a bedroom that is shared with other people, which is kind of like a hostel. Now, we only look at homes that are entire homes. We don't look at shared rooms or even private rooms, because that's not the business model that 99.9% of people are going to be doing. So if you're going to be doing that business model, this is not going to be useful data for you, okay? And so anyways, all of our data has just entire home listings. That's step one. So we removed everything else. Then step two, it has to be over 274 days. I've already mentioned this multiple times. It needs to be over 274. That way we can get the true or closest to annualized revenue number that we could possibly get, right? Another thing that happens very often is that the link doesn't actually open up. And so you could be in here, you click this, and it opens up, and it just brings you back to the Airbnb homepage. Now, we have done something that allows for the vast majority of this data to be removed with the links that don't open, but that's still going to happen. You're going to get like an error page that says 404, or it's going to bring you to the homepage. In that case, that's going to be bad data, okay? The other thing that we do is we remove anybody with less than 20 reviews. Now, if you're managing a property on a full-time basis, you're going to get more than 20 reviews over a 274-day period. It's just how it works. You should be getting 1 to 5 every single month. And so if you're getting way less than that, you're most likely not a full-time host. And it's a very quick way to veto the fact that to get rid of all the people who are doing it part-time and are only receiving maybe like 5 reviews over a full year. That's a very, very quick way for us to remove a lot of that data. And the data that you're receiving already has this done in there. Okay. And so the main things I want to point out here is that when you get a profit map, the data that you're looking at is, again, already over 274 days, which is this column right here. You'll never see anyone below 274. The number of reviews, which you can see in this column here, is always going to be above 20, so we're never going to have that. And then every single listing that you're looking at is an entire home and not a private room or a shared room. And that's how we get rid of the vast majority of the bad data just from those 3 things alone. And so that is super helpful. But there's also additional things within the calendars and the listings that you have to go through to vet and ensure that they are not bad data. So again, we've removed the vast majority, right? I can't say that enough. However, there is still bad data with what you're looking at right here. And that's why we have this column called good data. And so what you need to do, and the main thing that I do to check and confirm if a listing is a full-time host or not, is I review to see if they have had a review every single month for the past 12 months. That's how I know they're a full-time host. And this is the main thing that I do. And I do this with every single piece of data and listing that I open up. I always check the reviews first, okay? And so as you can see, I have some additional things here as well that we'll get into. But the main one, and I can't stress this enough, the main one is just checking that there has been a review every single month for the past 12 months, okay? And so I open it up, I check the calendar, and as you can see here, we've got 2 for July. We have 1 in June, 1 in May, 1 in April, 1 in March, a couple in March, couple in February, January, quite a few in January, actually. Then we got some in December, November. Honestly, everything about this actually feels really good, other than we're missing missing July and August for this one here. And we're looking at Fort Lauderdale. The only thing that's making me nervous with this data here is obviously the fact that we're missing those months there, but then also there's a good amount of reviews over the winter-ish season. But then when we get to April and May, there's actually, in June, there's quite a bit less. So I don't know if that's slower season or if there's just not a lot of bookings there, but that makes me a little uneasy about it when I look at it at first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be going through a lot of these different examples as to what you're likely going to see when it comes to the reviews in the next video. And so I'm just trying to do an overview for this one right now, right? And so another example would be this one, which I know has a lot of data. So you can see July, a lot of bookings for July, a lot of bookings for June. And this is a place that is in Canada. So naturally, I wouldn't expect it to have a ton of bookings in the off season, but we'll see, right? So I can see there's, again, a lot of bookings during every single month. I can see tons and tons of reviews. This to me is some of the most believable data that you could ever possibly get, because there's so many reviews for every single month that you know these people are fully booked during this time frame, and that the data that you're looking at is most likely 100% accurate or really, really close to that. And so you can see they don't have any more reviews since December of 2022, which means this is likely a listing that is this actually isn't a part of my good or bad data, but this, if it was, it would need the 274 pieces of data. I just recorded this after, I just found this listing after opening up Airbnb. And so what I'm trying to say here is that you're always looking for reviews over a 12-month period and ensuring that there has been reviews every single month for that time frame. The next video is going to explain this in way more depth, okay? And then the next thing is the calendar isn't spotty. And so if somebody is booking out an Airbnb on a regular basis, the calendar is going to be spotty. So let me show you what I mean by that. If I were to click into this, you can see that there's a booking, there's a 1 day available here, but all these other ones with the line through it are days that are not available. And so that's a very spotty calendar. It's kind of like there's random days that are available and most of the other days are booked. There's no consistency to anything that I'm seeing here. And so what that means is that people are actively booking this home for the random dates. When you see that it's very, very, very clean, or there's almost no bookings, or it's all blocked off, that's when you got to start getting worried and being like, why is it so perfectly clean? Right now, if it is perfect, but there are still bookings randomly, but it's like for the entire week, maybe they have a 7-night minimum. That could be a case, and you just look for that stuff like that by highlighting it and seeing, what's their minimum night, which shows up at the top part right up there. I believe it was just there a second ago. Yeah, you can see 2-night minimum would be theirs. Okay. And so you're checking the calendar again to make sure that it looks spotty, because when people's book listings are actually getting actively booked, they will have spotty calendars. Okay. The next one is that one would be making significantly more than others. Now, I tried to find an example of this. I unfortunately wasn't able to find one, But what'll happen every once in a while is you'll look into a listing and you'll have everybody making 100,000, and then you have one person making 300,000. And that usually means there's some sort of error within the data and it's not actually right, unless it's an outrageously beautiful listing that clearly is performing extremely well. Now, you can't really do much with that data. You can't use it. You can't really because you want more than one piece of data unless you're going to take that kind of a risk. But most of the time when you see a listing that is way above everybody else and doesn't look like it should be way above everybody else, like the listing itself isn't that much better, then there's usually something wrong with the data, and you should not trust it. Okay. Moving forward, this one here is probably one of the most important ones that can very easily get missed and can really screw you up when you're going to make a really big investment. And so what some people do in some markets, such as Charleston, is they have these there's a lot of like multi-unit buildings that people turn into Airbnbs, right? Now, if you were to look at this listing right here, you can see it's a 6-bedroom, it sleeps 16 plus people, and it's in this blue building right now, that you can see right there. And if you were to look at this photo, what you can see is you have this chair right here, and you have this chair right here, along with the brown couch and these sort of beams above the ceiling. Now, if I go to this listing over here, what you're going to see is those same 2 chairs, that brown couch, and the beams above there. And if you were to look, this is a 3-bedroom. So how do we have the exact same living room and one's a 3-bedroom and one is a 6-bedroom? Well, what's happening here is this is what's referred to as a parent listing. And so this listing is a makeup of the entire building. However, there's multiple different units within this building, say 4 different units. And each unit is its own individual Airbnb listing. And then this parent listing is the combination of all those listings together, okay? Which means that when one of these individual units, so like this 3-bedroom here, gets booked, the calendar over here gets blocked, okay? This one would get blocked because it can no longer rent out the entire building because one of the units has now been rented. And so what happens with the algorithm is the algorithm comes in and it just looks like a regular booking. And so it assumes that it actually got booked for that price. And so what happens is these parent listings always tend to look like they're doing extremely well because they're obviously way more expensive than the regular listings, and they're always getting booked because each individual unit is obviously getting booked at one point or another. So these are super dangerous listings, and the way that you can avoid them is if you find one that looks like this, and it tends to be a larger unit, you can just click this photo right there. That's going to bring you all the way down to the host. You click the host's photo again. It's going to bring you to their profile. You then scroll down to their listings. You can see all their listings. You can view all 33 listings. You can click into it and you can try and find to see if there is an actual listing that matches up with the other one. So for this one, what I did was I opened up the photos here. I reviewed all of the photos and tried to memorize the kitchens that I was looking at here. As you can see, there's also multiple kitchens if you were to go through this entire thing. And so I was memorizing all these things. And then what I did was I went onto their thing here, and I just tried to find one of these photos that matched up with one of the photos that I saw in the listing. And as you can see, I found it right here with the beams and the couch and everything. And I was like, okay, there's the child listing to the parent listing. Therefore, the parent listing is not accurate. Okay. Never, ever trust a parent listing's data, please. So with that being said, that turned into being bad data, okay? And then the last one here is just a bad listing. So sometimes you're going to come across listings that are just really bad. iPhone photos, no design, nothing along those lines, just really bad. And you may be looking at and be like, wow, that home is the same size as the home I'm looking at, but it's a really bad listing, but it's making like $30,000 to $40,000 less than everybody. It's not helpful. Right? That's never really going to be a helpful listing for you to be able to make a decision based off of it, because you're not going to put a listing together that looks that bad. And if you are, then it is a great piece of data. But please don't put together a listing that looks that bad. Okay? And I tend to just ignore the listings that are really bad, unless I'm in a market where all the listings are bad. Then it's just the norm. Okay? So that's the only variance there. So with all that being said, these items here are already removed from your profit map when you receive it, which is the best because we're getting rid of so much bad data. Then you have to always check to see if there's a review every single month for the past 12 months. If you get a little bit confused with this and maybe you're iffy about a listing or something, that's when you start looking into these other ones to see if maybe there's another reason why you might not trust it. And eventually, if you do this enough and over again, you'll start to realize like, oh, I don't really trust this. Something's off about this listing, even though it's got seems like it has enough reviews every single month. You could then pull up the calendar and check the look there. Maybe it's making significantly more. Maybe it's a parent listing or a child listing or something along those lines. And you can review those things too. And then the last way that you verify if data is good data or bad data is when you're going through all of these listings. Sometimes what happens is one of them, let's say this one, looks like it's doing significantly better than it should be. Okay, so what I mean by that, say this listing is a worse home with worse photos and worse design in comparison to all the other ones around it. And you're like, I don't understand how this one's making $78,000 a year because it doesn't look nearly as nice as the rest of these. That's bad data. There's something wrong there. And that's why we use 5 to 10 comps every single time to verify if the data is accurate or not, because then we get rid of those outliers that it's hard to catch, even when they have a good amount of reviews and a spotty calendar and all of these things. Okay. And it works both ways. Some listings will be really bad and look like they're making a lot, and some listings will be really good but look like they're not making a lot. And whenever that happens, either way, you just have to ignore that data and trust the fact that there is a pattern in the data. There is logic behind how much these homes make. And they're usually, when something doesn't add up, there's a reason behind it. Okay. And it's okay to remove that data. So with all that being said, that's the good and the bad data and how you go through it. And then in the next video, I'm going to show you some live raw videos of me actually breaking it down and making sense of it, and going through a bunch of different scenarios so that you can have a better understanding of how I make sense of this data as I'm going through it. Okay. I'll see you in that next video. How's it going, everybody? I'm just going to make a quick video to help you organize your data better when you're analyzing it in comparison to the ways that I've taught it in the past for free. It's very straightforward. It's very simple. I just strongly recommend that you do it this way because it makes it so much easier when you're analyzing the data. Okay. So again, we've gone through good data, bad data. I'm going to get in more depth with it as well, but just want to sort of show off that we have this column here called good data and another one called notes. Okay. Now with good data, what I do is when I review a piece of data and I know that it is good data, I'll simply come in here and write yes, right? If I want to go quick, I'll just put Y, and that tells me that it is good data. Okay. The next thing is that if I know that it's bad data, obviously we're putting no, or we're just putting N when we do that. Okay. And those those two scenarios is extremely straightforward. However, there's also going to be scenarios where you have a piece of data and you feel like it's real, but you're not 100%. And so what I always put is most likely. And what this is telling me is like, it tells me how much I should trust this piece of data when I'm analyzing the data. So in other words, it meets pretty well most of the requirements, but maybe it just doesn't have as many reviews as I thought it should have, or there's something about it that's just throwing me off. And I want to, in other words, be cautious of this piece of data when it comes time to analyze it. Whereas this one here, I know for a fact it's not good data. It only had 3 reviews over the entire year. That's easy. But there's a lot of them that are kind of like in between, and I still, even to this day, I'm not 100% sure which way or the other. And so I put most likely, and it just is a good way to gauge. Now, this next one I'm going to explain, honestly, I don't need to do, but I do it because for the exact same reason as the one that's above that says most likely, but I will put in maybe. And maybe to me is closer to no, and most likely is closer to yes. Okay, so with maybe, it's like maybe this could be real. Maybe it's on VRBO. Maybe it's something along those lines, right? And honest, so what I'll put in is maybe, but honestly, if I write maybe, I almost never ever look at this data again. But I know that it has a decent amount of reviews, but not nearly enough. But it wasn't enough to feel 100% certain that it wasn't accurate, and it wasn't enough to even feel partially right that it was going to be a yes, right? So I put maybe. You can do whatever you think is best for you, but for these two in the middle, you're definitely going to be uncertain about some data, and you need some sort of way of tracking it with whatever words resonate best for you. But for me, this is what I like to put. Now, one other thing that you're going to want to put in here, and this is going to be really useful for the remote markets that are more of a VRBO heavy market. What you'll notice is we only have the Airbnb listings and not VRBO listings. And so what you can put in here is VRBO. Or you could go maybe VRBO or whatever you want to say, which essentially is just indicating to you that it most likely is on VRBO, or you need to check VRBO. In other words, you see that it has like a good amount of reviews, but not every review. But there's maybe let's say like 15 throughout the entire year, and so you're like, well, there's a review almost every single month, right? And you know that there's a lot of VRBO listings in that market, and VRBO is pretty heavy within that market. And so what you can do is then go over to VRBO, find the listing, and check to see if it has those sort of missing reviews throughout the year that would make it look like it has been rented out full time throughout the entire year. So that definitely does happen, and sometimes you just need to check VRBO. Okay. Again, only really recommend that in VRBO heavy markets, which are more of the like traditional small vacation markets nowadays. Okay. So the reason you do this is because what's going to happen is you're going to be tracking all this data, and there's going to be all these different scenarios where sometimes they're yeses, sometimes they're nos, and sometimes they're kind of all in between, right? And then you've got all of this different data as you're going through, but now it's kind of all over the place. So you have these ones are yeses, these ones are no. They could be like this could be a yes, no, and it's not the no, having the no information in there is not helpful because this shouldn't matter anymore. As soon as we verify that it's not real data, we don't want to see it. And so if you just click this number one right there, it'll highlight this entire row, and then you click the filter button, and then you click the little funnel or filter, whatever you want to call it right there. And then what you're going to do, oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong one. On the good data one, you want to click that there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to see all these different options down here of yeses and nos. Now, obviously, I just sporadically did this really quickly. But let's say you get rid of all the blank ones because you didn't track anything below 50,000 because they're all just bad listings, right? Or that's why they weren't making that much. And then you get rid of all the maybes. You leave the maybe VRBOs. You leave the most likelies. You get rid of all the nos that are showing up, and you leave all the ones that say yes. And then what ends up happening, and if you take a look at this column right here, right, we have all these different numbers. But if you get rid of all the bad ones, you press OK, now you're just looking at significantly less data, and now you're looking at only the good data. And so now the patterns become different in here, where the groupings of 10,000 to 20,000 have now shrunk by quite a bit. And it's easier and cleaner to be able to review this data when you do it in this format. And I cannot recommend it enough to add in yes, nos, and maybes and most likelies into this column, and then filter out all the bad data. So you're just looking at only good data, so you can find that pattern within the data and be able to truly see what's actually happening in this market. Okay. And so that's my breakdown of how to use this column here. Just trust me, it's worth it. It helps a lot. And I apologize that my video is blurry. I don't know how long it's been blurry for, but I hope that helped you guys out, and I'll see you in the next video. How's it going, everybody? I just want to take a moment to stress the fact that local knowledge is extremely useful when you're doing your research. Of course, the data is going to be able to get us about 99% of the way there. However, the local knowledge that you can get from a realtor or other Airbnb hosts in the area, or just anyone that lives in that area, is going to be extremely beneficial when you're trying to analyze a property and truly try and figure out the actual revenue of it. You may even be able to figure out insights about the customer demographic that you'd be hosting within that area that could lead you to focusing in on a different type of property that could have better potential returns. Okay. I just want to give some examples here. So there's a market that we were considering entering into, and we actually called up a property management company that existed there and paid them to give us a breakdown of everything that we needed to know about the customer demographic that would show up within that market. And one thing that we learned was it was an extremely big deal to have the living room, the second living room, separate from the original living room, because it was such a strong family market where the adults wanted to hang out in the upstairs sort of common area, but they needed like a kid's room in the basement. That piece of information was so beneficial. We actually use it in almost all of our family related markets now moving forward. Additionally, we found out it was one of these markets where there was like 3 to 4 generations of families that would always be traveling together. And so you would get a lot of grandparents who couldn't walk, and they needed a wheelchair accessible ramp to be able to actually get into the home. And if you had that, you had a huge advantage over everybody else because it was such a common thing. And so that was another piece of information that we used and utilized when we're actually being able to put up our own listings. And so what I'm trying to stress here is these little things, you would not necessarily figure out within the data, right? And there's a lot that a local realtor can definitely help you out with. A local property management can definitely help you out with, because they're incentivized to try and get your business, right? And so if you express interest in potentially working with them and have a genuine expression of wanting to work with them, right? There's always the potential that you could end up working with them, and try to ask them questions about the area that maybe are things that you would not know, right? You could also talk to a local general contractor and try to get an understanding of what the home types are, like little things that are quirks about the homes that that is uncommon from the market that you are currently in as well. A good example of this is not really a good example, but there could be an issue of flooding within a general area, and usually that's going to show up in flood insurance. When you're actually trying to get the property, there's going to be some sort of indicator to that. But a general contractor just might be able to give you a little bit more information than maybe you didn't know you needed, right? What is the permitting process like to be able to get a property up in that area? How hard would it be to put a pool or a deck on the back of the home, right? These little things are potential reasons where a local person with their local knowledge could really benefit what you were trying to figure out. The walking score for location. I mean, I was in Chicago, and the different neighborhoods within Chicago is insane. There's so many different little neighborhoods, and the walkability to these different locations is really, really important. The walkability to the subway was extremely important. And sometimes the data will kind of point these things out for you, but sometimes it just won't. And so you have to try and get that local knowledge to really hone in and make sure that you are getting the best possible property in the best possible area. Of course, never, ever, ever rely 100% on what they're saying, what the locals are saying, that they are saying the best thing is to do. As an example, when I went to Chicago, I had a realtor tell me all of the wrong places that I should go, but that was just his sort of gut feeling as to where to go. Whereas the data told me all the right places to go, but he gave me a lot of little insights as to things I should be looking for and not be looking for, and what neighborhoods to worry about and which ones not to worry about. So with all that being said, I'm just trying to stress the fact that you should talk to a local before you enter into a market that you're unfamiliar with. This is a standard practice with TechVestor. We do not enter anywhere without talking to a local. And I can't recommend it enough. So I hope that's been helpful for you. I hope that motivates you to try and reach out and find somebody. And hopefully you can learn something new about a market, and hopefully it's extremely beneficial, and hopefully it makes you a lot of money. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. How's it going, everybody? For this video, what we're going to go through is how to figure out the saturation levels of a market. Okay, so why is saturation a bad thing? First off, and saturation is a bad thing because what's essentially happening is that there are so many new listings that are showing up on a market that there's not enough tourism to actually fill all of those Airbnbs. And so the people who own the Airbnbs are starting to make less and less money because there's so many options for people to go to that they actually get spread out. Whereas if, let's say there's 100 listings in a market, but there's 200 people that are trying to go to that market, every single one of those Airbnbs would be filled up, right? When a market is saturated, there's 200 Airbnbs, but there's only 100 people that want to go to that market. And so then therefore there's too many Airbnbs for the amount of people that are actually traveling there. And it's really hard to gauge if a market is saturated or not, because in some cases, as an example, Kissimmee, Florida has like 30,000 Airbnbs, but it's not a saturated market. And that's not even including the hotel rooms, right? And so the saturation level truly is related to how much demand there is for that market. And there is a way to be able to figure that out. Now, naturally, you don't want to enter a market that is saturated. The only really way you're going to know. So if a market is saturated, obviously you're not going to go into it, and I'll be able to show you how to figure that out. There's other markets that look like they're becoming saturated, and those ones you also need to be worried about. And then there's some that kind of toe the line consistently because they just have a lot of demand. And when there's a ton of demand, there's also a ton of people who really want to enter into those markets and open up Airbnbs. And then there's markets that are very clearly not saturated. They're growing markets, and you can see that there's a good amount of new Airbnbs that are showing up, but the supply is very clearly keeping up with that. And so the purpose of this video is to show you my method to be able to figure out if a market is saturated or not, right? However, we need to use AirDNA to be able to figure this out. The profit map and point analytics is not able to produce this as of right now, just because we do not have historical data. We are working on that. We may have it by the time you watch this, but at this point we do not. And so you're going to need to use AirDNA. Now, unfortunately, you're also going to have to buy a subscription for whatever market that you want to look into to be able to get the saturation levels for a certain market. And so my recommendation is, if you feel that your market is saturated, or if you're worried about your market being saturated that you're going to be entering into, at that point is when you should buy your AirDNA subscription, and not prior to that. Okay. And then on top of that, if you are planning on looking into the saturation levels, no matter what, wait until you've figured out what market that you're going to go into. Start to do your work in that market to figure out if there's some potential. Start to build the buy box. Start to put some of that work in there. And then once you're certain that like that's going to be one of your markets, that's when you want to check the saturation levels. Now that may kind of seem backwards. Like I'm telling you, hey, do all this work for market, then you find it out saturated and you're never going to enter into it. And that is the possibility that could happen. However, most markets honestly are not saturated. They're close, but not all of them are saturated. I've looked into a lot of markets. I've only found one that was truly, truly saturated. And that's Atlantic City for anyone who wants to know. And so my recommendation is that you're probably going to narrow down your list. You're going to have like 5 places that you're going to want to, potentially deep dive. And I don't want you to buy 5 subscriptions for AirDNA just to be able to figure out if it's saturated or not. Generally, if you start going through the data and if everything is not making sense, or if it doesn't seem like people are making enough money, that's when it's like, okay, maybe it's saturated. But you don't need to buy the subscription right away is what I'm trying to get across. Okay. Do your work, go through the process. If you're really concerned about it, then you can go through this whole analysis to be able to figure out if a market is saturated or not. Okay. So let me explain. Before I get into the process and walk you through all this data that you can see here, let me just explain saturation to you in a sort of easy way to understand, right? If a market gets 10% more listings, what you want is that you want the revenue for that market to also increase by 10%, because what that means is that each individual listing has made the exact same amount of money year over year, regardless of the fact that there's 10% more listings in that market, right? So we've got all these new listings, but is everybody, including the new listings, still making the same amount year over year? And in a growing market, that's exactly how that's going to happen. In a saturated market, people will start losing money year over year, okay? And again, that's what we're going to be able to figure out here. So you want you want it to either be even or close to even, right? So 10% up and 10% up, or you want the revenue to always outpace the supply. Okay. It's always best for the revenue to be increasing higher than the supply. That means everybody is making more money regardless of all the new listings. So with that being said, the way that we're going to figure this out is we're going to be using AirDNA. And AirDNA shows one part of the formula for free, but then they hide the other part, which is the revenue section. And so what you are seeing here is the rental growth. And rental growth is the number of active rentals that existed during this time frame. So you can see this is Q2 of 2020, and there was 9,714 listings. Now we're in Q2 of 2023, and there are 13,485 active rentals. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that the number of active rentals here is actually different than the number up here. I do not know why. Unfortunately, I have no idea why, and I haven't been able to figure out the answer for that. I apologize. Just ignore it and just use the information data that's here, because it does give you a good understanding if a market is saturated or not. Now, one other thing that I want to point out here is that if you are considering a certain market and you're not sure if you want to spend the money to get a 1 month subscription for AirDNA to be able to figure out the saturation levels, if I saw a market like this where the last 9 months, there's almost been the exact same amount of rentals across the board with a small increase for the 3 months prior to that, I wouldn't be worried about the saturation levels. Okay. You should really only be worried about the saturation levels when it's a very clear uptick in the number of rentals that you're seeing here. If it just looks like it's going straight up, that's when you got to be concerned. If there's no leveling out, then you don't really need to worry about it all that much, if I'm being completely honest. Okay. That's the quickest way you can figure that out. And so, again, this is what we're seeing is the number of active rentals and how much they've grown. So if I were to, look here, Q2 of 2023, I can see there's 13,000. If I were to go to Q2 of 2022, I can see there were 12,274. So obviously there's more active rentals, but how many more? What is the exact percentage? And what is it for every single quarter year over year, right? We'll get into that. I'll explain how you pull that all out, okay? Then the next thing is you have your revenue over here. And so when you click the revenue tab, it gives you it in a couple of different ways. But the one that I care about for this formula is the total market revenue. So we know exactly how much revenue was made across all of Austin on a monthly basis. And what they allow you to do is actually just extract that data. So if you click this button, you can see right now it's now downloading that data. So now I can get that information. And what you want to do is click that. And what's going to do is pop open all of that data. Now, mine's a little screwed up, so I have to do it twice. And I just have an Excel viewer, right? This is all this is this is right here. It's just an Excel viewer. And so what you would want to do is take this information, bring it over to the saturation template on Google Sheets. So you can copy all that information there. So we're going to copy that. So right click, copy. And what you would then do is bring it over here, okay? And you would click into this one cell and you would paste that information. And it's going to paste everything that you see across these cells right here. So these 5 cells, these 5 columns, you can see that we would have pasted all the information that we would have gotten from AirDNA, okay? Now, once we have it into this sheet here, this is when we start putting in the work to be able to get to the answer of, is this a saturated market or not? As you can see, I'll scroll down and there's a summary tab that's right over here that we use to be able to figure that out, okay? I've also built this in a way where you can easily just paste in the information and about 90% of the work is done for you. However, I'm still going to explain to you exactly how this all works. So again, I started off and I pasted this information here. I did not have anything else. But the first thing that I did was I totaled up how much was made across these 4 different types of units. And so for whatever reason, they split up the amount of revenue that was made for houses and villas compared to unique listings, compared to B&Bs, compared to apartments. What I do is I take all that and I add it all up. And so if you use the sum formula, so equals sum, and then you go bracket, and then you would highlight all of those 4 rows, and then close bracket and press enter, it's going to give you the sum of all of those, so that it's just adding up each one of those cells. And so now we can see that there was $17 million made in all of Austin across all the Airbnbs for August of 2018, right? From there, once you've added in that formula, then you can grab this right here and just drag it down and drag it all the way to the bottom. And what that's going to do is add in that same formula for every single one of those rows. And then eventually you have the grand total for every single month for the past however many years this is, right? Then what we need to do is actually get the quarterly revenue. And the reason being is because the supply is displayed in quarterly quarterly markets. I'm not saying that right, but it's quarterly is what I'm trying to say. And so what you would do for this, and the way that I do this, is I like to go to the current year. I like to go to January, and I grab the first 3 months. So quarters, 3 months, right? And as you can see, we have these 3 months, and then we have this total right here. And so what I would have done is that same formula, but I would have been grabbing the 3 totals. So I'm in the total column, as you can see, and I grabbed the total from January, February, and March, and I summed them up. And then what that gives me is the total sum, right? Then to be able to do that for all of the other months and quarters, what I do is I actually highlight here, here, and here. So I'm grabbing from the start of that quarter. So January 1, even though it's an empty cell, I purposely highlight these 3 cells, okay? And the reason being is because if you then take this and click and hold it and drag it, it's going to know to keep those other 2 cells empty and just formulate on this one, okay? And so if you take, let's say for this scenario, what I did was I grabbed January and I grabbed all of these cells you can see here. So I grabbed however many that works out. Oh wait, no, I would grab from here, from January. So that's the 1 quarter. That's the 2nd quarter. So now I have that in there, and then I can grab it and I can actually go up as well. And so I'd go all the way up and highlight all of these, just highlight it. And now all of these would be calculated and formulated, right? So you can see these are the 3 quarters for, this would be Q4 of 2018. That's the total sum right there that we can see for that, okay? Then what I do is I take this information and let me close that up, take this information and I organize it in this nice little column that you can see here. So I got Q1 of 2021, 2022, all Q1, but different quarters. And I just simply have gone equals and I added in where that came from. Okay, so you can see that it's right there. And I did this for every single quarter during that time frame. Then what I did was I went and I got the amount of Airbnb listings during that quarter. And so I call that supply. And you can see it says 8,869, and that's for Q1 of 2021. So if I go back to this chart here and go to Q1 of 2021, which is that one right there, hover over this little dot, it's going to say 8,869. and then I just manually typed that information in. Okay, so there's no way to extract it. You just got to manually type it in. And then I did the exact same thing for every single one of these that you see here. Okay, then what I did is, now that I have the revenue quarter over quarter lined up with the supply quarter over quarter, we can now make sense of this and figure out what was the increase or decrease year over year for the revenue and for the supply. And that's what we're doing right here. So what you can see is that the formula that I used was the Q1 of 2022 divided by the Q1 of 2021, and then I minus 1 to give us a nice percentage, right? So you can see that there was an increase of 88% year over year. So the revenue was 81 million for 2022, which was an 88% increase from 43% from 2021, which is a huge increase, right? And then what I would do is the exact same formula so we can get the year over year increase for each of these different time frames. And so now we can see exactly how much the revenue has increased year over year, quarter by quarter, okay? And then we would have done the exact same thing for the supply and just taken the year over year amount and added that same formula in, and now we can see how much the supply has increased during that time frame. Then what you do is you figure out how much the revenue has been outpacing the supply, right? Because we always want the revenue to outpace the supply. And so what you can see is during this quarter, the revenue outpaced the supply by 66%, which means the revenue increased a significant amount in comparison to the amount of listings that were actually in the Austin market during this time frame. This would have been due to COVID, okay? And as you can see here, in the next quarter, it only increased by 9%. So it actually leveled out during that time frame, and it actually leveled out moving forward for the next 15 months. So now that we have these numbers, how do we interpret them? How do we make sense of what we're looking at right now? And the reality is that every single market's going to be a little bit different, and there's no perfect formula for this, but I'm going to do my best to try and explain it in the way that makes sense to me, okay? Like I said before, if the revenue increases by 10% and the supply increases by 10%, I'm okay with that. That means everybody is still making the same amount of money they did the year prior, even with all the new listings. And so when I see something like 3% increase or 3% decrease, to me, that's not even remotely a big deal. That just means that everybody is making almost the exact same amount of money. Even when I see a 9% increase and a 9% decrease, again, I'm not that concerned, because a 9% increase is great. That means each individual listing made 9% more year over year, even though there were 42% more listings during that time frame. So many new Airbnbs showed up, but even with all those new Airbnbs, everybody ended up making 9% more than they would have done the year prior. However, the following month, they did the exact opposite. So they actually made 9% less. And that was with an increase of 41% listings, right? Year over year. And so the way that I kind of think about this, and like the only time I ever really get concerned, is if I see negatives consistently and double digit negatives. So if I start seeing, if I see like -3, -4, -7, -10, that kind of concerns me because it's constantly in the negatives. However, if I see, so it's like negative, 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 right? But what you can see here is we have a positive, then a negative, then a positive, positive, then a negative. And they're all fairly close to each other. To me, this is just telling me this market is in perfect equilibrium with each other. There's more supply, there's more revenue, there's more demand to be able to keep up with that new supply. And it just keeps going and keeps going. And it's going back and forth really, really nicely right now, right? And if I were to see this and it would be negative, 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 even by 5 to 10% consistently, that would just tell me that the market is constantly a little bit over, like there's almost too much supply consistently. And so if I were to be using, the revenue of the past 12 months, which is the revenue that we use, I would have to assume that the revenue is going to be decreased by, let's say, 5%, if that was the average across all of that, right? And so, and that just tells me like, okay, if I have a home that's going to make $100,000, I just have to assume that's probably going to make $95,000 because it's going to make 5% less year over year, okay? However, where to be like really concerned is when you see those double digit negatives year over year over year, right? Or sorry, quarter over quarter over quarter. And so it's like 10% down, 11% down, 15% down, 20% down. That's where it's like, okay, this market is very clearly oversaturated. There's not enough demand to be able to keep up with the amount of supply that's here. And so then therefore this is an oversaturated market. All right. And then the exact opposite is one of the best things to see because it's very clearly a growing market. So in other words, the revenue is showing, 10% up, 15% up, 20% up every single quarter. You can see that the revenue is seriously outperforming in comparison to the supply, and that would be a great market to be able to enter at that time frame because you're going to sort of reap the rewards of a growing market, right? Personally, when I see this in Austin, I am not worried even a little bit. I would definitely still move forward with the property in Austin. I can see that the past 15 months they've just been consistently keeping up with each other, even with all this new supply. There's clearly a lot of demand for Austin. This is it's towing the line sort of back and forth. But the reality is that it could dip over the next little while, but I would feel pretty confident that it's a pretty stable market that you could enter into and continue to move forward with. And so with all that being said, that's my analysis and how I would be reviewing this. Again, it's not a perfect formula. I think personally, it's just very clear when you see the numbers as to if you feel comfortable with it or not, because you will see a lot of negative and it'll scare the crap out of you, or you'll see a lot of positive and you'll be really excited about it, right? And so that's the way that I would be thinking about this, and I hope that that makes sense to you as well, and a good way for you to think about it as well, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a way that you can actually duplicate this and get this information a lot quicker than having to go through all the steps that I just went through. So this is obviously a template. So what you want to do is click the little down arrow right there, click duplicate, and now we have it again, right? And so what you can do is you can then type in any location that you want. So let's go with Chicago. And if you have bought the subscription for AirDNA for Chicago, what you could then do is go over to the revenue column again, and then you're going to extract the data, just like the total market revenue, just like we did before. You click it and extract it, and it's going to pop open the data there, and then it's going to it's going to show up in the viewer. However, again, we are going to we're going to do it again. So I'm going to do it twice. So there we go. And now I can copy all this data. So I'm going to copy all this information. And then again, you don't have to do it twice. I just have to do it twice because I use a really cheap viewer. And so I copy all that information. And then if I click right where it says date, so I'm holding right where it says date, and I'm going to go control paste, right? And I've now pasted all that information in there. What that has now done, it's changed all of my totals to work with the Chicago data. And all of my quarterly numbers are now based off of that as well. And then if you scroll down here, all of your quarterly numbers are also based off of the numbers that are showing up over here. So you can see 63, 63, right? And then even these formulas here are calculated as well. The only thing that you would need to do is change out the numbers that you see here. You can do that by, again, going over to the overview section of that location, going to the rental growth, and tracking each one of these the amount of listings that you see here, and adding them to this section here. And then these formulas will all calculate, and all these formulas will then calculate. So literally the only thing you have to do is paste in the new data and change that there, and you're going to know if a market is saturated or not. Okay. So I hope that was very helpful. Again, you if you're going to be buying an AirDNA subscription and because you're concerned that a market is saturated, I really only recommend it if you see that the columns are going straight up. As you can see for Chicago, it's been super flat for years now. And so in other words, this is not a market that I'd be worried about being saturated. And so it's fine as is, right? Only when you can see sort of like a hockey stick going straight up, that's when you should be concerned about it. And, or if you're just a person who wants to know the saturation levels of that market, then you can buy the AirDNA subscription and follow the entire process that I just showed you. And it's going to tell you if that market is going to be saturated or not. And you'd have to follow this entire process. And of course you have access to this template. And so that's everything that I wanted to explain for this. I was going to do a summary, but I believe I summarized in the right spots as I was continuing to go along. So just go back to those sections if you need to go back to them to figure them out. But I hope this has been helpful for you. It has been helpful for me. It's a good thing to keep an eye on. And I hope that we have this within the software sooner than later. So thank you, everybody, and I'll talk to you later. How's it going, everybody? For this video, what I'm going to be showing you is something that is not a part of my process, right? It's not a necessary thing that you need to do. However, I've been using it to figure out entire markets fairly quickly for podcasts that I've been doing with Avery Carl. And I'm going to show you how to do it and show you how it could be beneficial. But if I'm being completely honest, I don't know exactly where it fits in within my process. It's just something additional that you could potentially do that you might find beneficial. for analyzing markets. So without any further ado, let's get into it, right? Now you'll have all of your simple data that you can use to be able to do this process. I'm using a different data set. This is an older data set that I was using from the past, but the process is the exact same, okay? So what I would do is highlight this entire row and add the filter so that I had the ability to filter through all this different data, right? And what I'm doing is getting just one bedroom count. So I want just the studios for this entire market. And what I'm going to take is the revenue for just that bedroom count. And then I would copy it and bring it over to another sheet over here. And so, without wasting too much time, I obviously did this for every single different bedroom count that you can see here. So I did it for studios, then I would grab all the one bedrooms and just grab all their revenue, the 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, so on and so forth, right? And the reason I do this is because I want to try to see if there is a bedroom count where there's the most consistent revenue, where I could expect people to be booking that home out more than others. And I'm also trying to see if a certain bedroom count tends to make more money than another bedroom count. And the reason I'm showing this example is because it is very insightful and very interesting. If you look at the 2 bedrooms, right, there are a lot of listings that are doing above 80,000. So about this many listings are doing above 80,000. If you look at the 4 bedrooms, there are some initial properties that are making more. There's more properties doing over 100,000, as you can see. However, we actually dropped to properties making in the 60,000s faster than we do with the 2 bedrooms. And to me, that's super fascinating. Like, why are the 2 bedrooms significantly outpacing and outdoing the 4 bedrooms within this market, right? That's a huge error within this market. For whatever reason, 4 bedrooms just aren't making as much money as 2 bedrooms. And then on top of that, when you look at the 3 bedrooms, it's very clear that the vast majority of the people doing the best have 3 bedrooms. Even if you compare it directly up against the 5 bedrooms, there's way more people doing better with 3 bedrooms than there are with 5 bedrooms. And honestly, you can make the same argument that there's more people doing better with 2 bedrooms than there are with 5 bedrooms, right? And so in other words, what I was able to realize was that 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms within this general Shenandoah Valley area had way better potential to hit the revenue targets in comparison to 4, 5, 6, or anything else. And honestly, even 1 bedrooms are doing well here. And so my sort of takeaway from this was that large groups were not traveling to this area very often. Yes, there was very clearly some properties that were large and were making a good amount of money, but it wasn't a lot of consistency behind it. And so it's hard to make a good data-based decision based off of that. And so my thought was, if I'm going to be entering into this market and I can see that 2 bedrooms do very well, yes, 3 bedrooms are more consistent, but a 2 bedroom would be cheaper and there's still a lot of money being made with these ones, right? I would most likely be looking into a 2 bedroom to be reaping the rewards of all these homes that are performing really well within this market, right? So in other words, it helped me very quickly be able to realize what sized bedroom might be the best for me to look into. It also helped me understand what sized groups were actually traveling to this area more than others. And so with that information, it would be useful to then study all the 2 bedrooms and understand what was allowing them to do that. And honestly, if you may be looking at this and be like, well, I actually would rather just look into the 3 bedrooms because there's even more opportunity to make more money. And that's definitely an option as well. And you could then start with the 2 bedrooms, then go to the 3 bedrooms, then out of curiosity, check into the 1 bedrooms and see, like, why are these ones doing so well? What's happening here? And maybe trying to see, what's happening with these 6 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, and 4 bedrooms that are performing like above, right? Actually, these ones are performing above. But I would still be, trying to look at it in that way. In other words, what I just explained to you is by looking at the data in this format, you're able to figure out which bedroom count you would actually want to hyper focus in on, and then where you would go from there to continue with your research, right? Because you always got to start somewhere, and then you want to kind of let your curiosity explore as you continue to go. But I just found that super interesting that the 2 bedrooms were doing so well in this market comparison to 4s, 5s, and 6s, right? And honestly, that obviously is going to be a significantly cheaper place to get. And so then therefore, it would be a better place to potentially go into. So this might be helpful for somebody that wants to do this within a certain market. I don't think this would work very well in cities, if I'm being honest. I think this is going to be a better option for a more remote sort of area. Like I might even attempt this in like a Gatlinburg, which has a ton of data, but I still would be curious what it'd look like in Gatlinburg or any sort of smaller vacation type of market. I'd be curious what this would look like as well. So I hope that's helpful for you guys. Again, I don't know exactly how it's going to fit into the process, but you can definitely do this for your own market and see what kind of insights you find. Hope that's helpful. See you in the next video. How's it going, everybody? For this video, what we're going to be going over are all of the expenses that you could potentially have with a property and how to figure out these expenses. Now, most of this is going to be pretty straightforward. There's going to be some of them that are not, and then there's some that I find to be extraordinarily important to figure out before you actually get started, especially if you've never been in that market. Okay. So, just as a quick story to scare anybody who is considering to not put in this work and just kind of make up the numbers and assume it's going to get around that amount, I want to explain this. I had properties in Chicago and there were 4 bedrooms and I paid $125 per clean to the cleaning company that I was working with at the time. Okay. Whereas when I went to Scottsdale, I had 4 bedrooms as well, and I was paying $250 per clean every single time. So it was exactly double what I was paying in Chicago. And so when I was doing my underwriting and evaluating the properties for Scottsdale, I was using my Chicago's numbers, assuming that it would be the same down in Scottsdale, right? And so what ended up happening was my underwriting was actually off by about $10,000 because it was double the price in Scottsdale. And that $10,000 was half of the profit that I was assuming to make. I was hoping to make $20,000 and I missed a $10,000 expense because I didn't make a single phone call. And so I can't stress this enough. We're going to go through all of these and figure out the exact ways you can actually figure these out. They're very easy to figure out in my opinion, but you need to put in a little bit of work just to figure them out to make sure that you're not missing any of these. Okay. So again, some are going to be super simple. Internet, if you really want to figure it out, you can call up the local internet company and figure it out. It's pretty standard across the country though. Same for TV and cable. Your water and electricity and natural gas. Okay. These ones you got to figure out first off, am I paying for them? Does the property actually have these? And then you need to figure out what they actually cost. Now, there's a bunch of different sites that you can go onto for every single different community and get a general understanding of what the water bill looks like or what the electricity bill looks like. These two here, I think, are going to be way higher in comparison for the property that you'd be looking into, depending on if it's a really hot market or a really cold market, right? Do you need a lot of heat or do you need a lot of AC? And then additionally, does the property have baseboard heating? Because if it has baseboard heating, it's going to be really, really expensive to keep that place warm throughout the entire year. And it might be something you might want to consider completely getting rid of if you're going to be buying that property. But it's just something that you really want to pay attention to. You can figure out this information again by going to the websites, or you can call local people and just ask for their information. Try and find a local Facebook group, pay somebody to get on the phone call with them that has an Airbnb to give you their numbers for a home that's roughly around the exact same size. It's very helpful to get this information. And another thing to figure out too is when it comes to water, I think it's gonna actually tie into one of these two, depending on the system you have. If you have a pool heater, your pool heater can run you hundreds of dollars every single month, hundreds. And if it's hooked up to like a propane system, that's going to cost you even more in comparison to that. And so really understanding your utility bills and what to expect based off the specific property you have and the systems you have set up within that property actually become extremely important. And we're not talking about like a couple $100 variance here. It can be a couple $1,000 variance. We have some properties in Scottsdale that literally cost us like $1,200 just to heat the pool on a monthly basis in the peak summer months because it gets so hot there. And so that's something that you need to be aware of when you're underwriting to make sure you're not, blowing all of your potential profit into your utility bills. Things like pest control is going to be very straightforward. Just give the company a call, see if this is even something that you actually need within that market, and figure out exactly how much it would cost to have somebody maintain that on a monthly basis if it's needed. The interior maintenance is something that you're always going to have to sort of make up. Now, when I talk about interior maintenance, we're talking about, did the couch break and you need to replace the couch? Do you need to replace some of the stuff in the kitchen because it got broken? Do you need to replace a bed frame because the bed frame broke, right? Like, what is it that you need to fix about that property furniture wise for the most part? And what can you expect there? Now, as a rough estimate, I was spending about $300 a month for my 4-bedroom properties in Chicago. Now, that's a rough estimate. I was renting that property. The furniture wasn't all that expensive. It's going to kind of depend on how much furniture you have in there, what type of guests that you're going to be hosting as well. Is it going to be families or is it going to be bachelor parties? That's going to give you a better understanding of what you can expect with that as well. So just sort of account for that. It's a reserve. You may not use it, but you might use it. So just keep an eye on that, okay? And then the next thing is going to be the pool maintenance. Now, Pool maintenance, you're just simply calling a pool company and asking them for a quote. Call for all the people you have to call, whether it be pool, lawn, pest control, or cleaning companies. Always try and get 3 quotes so you can get an understanding of exactly how much they generally cost to make sure you're not getting screwed over by the first person that you call, right? So again, outdoor landscaping, you just got to give the companies a call and figure that one out. The technology, this is actually going to be your software. So this is going to be your Hospitable or Guesty or Price Labs or those things. Just, these ones aren't going to make or break a deal, but you should have a general understanding of how much you're going to end up spending per platform, per property. Okay. Now, VA and accounting, this is dependent on if you're using a VA to manage your communication for your property. And if you're having a VA manage your accounting, right? So making sure that your bookkeeping is done properly. These are going to vary depending on what VA you get, what accounting system you get. If you're using people that are local or not local. So for this one, you should be able to figure this one out in general. And then this sort of expense could potentially be across multiple different properties. So say it costs you $1,000 a month for your bookkeeper, but your bookkeeper can handle up to 10 different properties at a time. It really only costs you $100 for that bookkeeper per property, right? Same thing goes for the VA as well. Now cleaning is probably the one that I cannot stress enough. This is like the most important one that you really want to be on top of. When it comes to cleaning, there's such a variance with prices between even the same cleaning companies within one local area. And so you really want to make sure that you're getting an accurate price. You're also not overpaying, but at the same time, make sure you're not getting somebody who's just doing the lowest price and giving the lowest, like not actually cleaning the property properly. And so, for the cleaning, you kind of want to find the in between. Somebody who's not too expensive, not the cheapest guy around, kind of right in the middle. That's kind of what you can expect. And that's what you should use for your underwriting. And then when it comes time to actually, get into that market and hire one of these cleaning companies, then you can like vet them and figure out which one's better than the other and make sense of everything. And, maybe the cheapest guy is the best guy, right? Or maybe you have to go with the most expensive one because you have a luxury property and it is what it is, right? So, but for underwriting, you can take a general scope of it and always overestimate with this stuff, right? So overestimate if they're saying 200, put in 250, right? That gives you a better cushion for a property and more potential to, if the property still works out, even with all of those cushions that you've added in there, it still would be a property you'd be willing to move forward with, and you feel a lot more confident on those types of properties. Okay. Placeholders, this is if you just want to, if there's something that you maybe are just thinking to yourself, like, I don't know what I want to add in, right? Or I'm missing anything. So I'm going to add an extra $200 a month for something I might have not be thinking about right now. And so it's kind of like a reserve account, or it's sort of a lack of knowledge account, right? Like, I don't know what I don't know. So I'm going to put some money aside. Sewer is dependent. Again, that falls in lines with the utilities. So the same logic that applied there goes with this. The supplies is really the amenities, right? So the shampoo that you're going to have to provide to every single guest, the dish soap that you're going to have to provide, the sponges, right? So all of these things. This one is again, it's going to be kind of hard to gauge until you've really gotten things going, and it's going to depend on the different markets and where you're buying things from as well. As an example, I was spending somewhere between $75 and $100 on a monthly basis for the supplies for a 4-bedroom in Chicago. Now, we were getting really good deals on the supplies that we were getting. And because I hired somebody who was really good at finding these deals, but prior to her starting, we were actually spending double that amount. So we were spending closer to about $150 to $200 per property per month on amenities. Okay. Also depends on the amenities that you provide. On top of that, you might be providing higher end soaps and shampoos, or you're providing a whole welcome package. All those things are going to come in and factor into your expenses, right? So make sure you're considering that. Now, your reserves are very important and need to be accounted for. Now, if you are opening up in the slow season, then you're going to have some money put aside to cover the expenses to get you to peak season. Because the reality is that you're probably not going to make enough money during the slow season to cover all of your bills to get you to the peak season where you start to make profit. And so you need to have some money aside for that. Now, additionally, if you also are going into the peak season, you need to use some of that profits and put it aside for when you go through the slow season. So it's going to be hard to gauge exactly how much that should be. There are ways of getting to a general idea of, should you put 5,000 away or should you put 20,000 away? Depending on every single property, it's going to be a little bit different. But you just want to put some sort of reserves away for that time period. You could also refer to reserves as just another cushion, as in like, hey, in case the utility bill goes higher than I thought it was going to go, or if the cleaning goes higher, we need to do more cleaning than I was expecting, or if something else goes wrong along these lines, I'm just going to have some reserves set aside just in case something goes wrong, right? Maintenance, something really big breaks in the house. So all these things here are going to apply for rental arbitrage people for the most part. Almost all of them across the board are going to apply for anyone who's in rental arbitrage and buying a property. Okay, so all of these ones, those apply. All these ones down here apply if you own the property. Okay, so moving forward, the property taxes. Now, this one is a huge one that you have to look into because every place is a little bit different, and then there's also like little nuances to this. There's entire states that we avoid at TechFesters simply because of the property taxes, and so you want to. There's websites that will allow you to figure out what the property taxes will be on a property if you just add in the address or add in what the purchase price will be of that property. They'll tell you what the county taxes are, what the city taxes are, what the whatever taxes they have, school taxes, whatever it may be. If you live in the property, if you don't live in the property, there's all the different ways that they calculate what the taxes will be for somebody owning that property. And so you need to look into that. There's websites that will allow you to figure that out. Okay. And then there's going to be the insurance on the property. So you're going to have to insure the property. So naturally, you want to figure out what that's going to be. There could also be, so you're going to have the home insurance, but you also might have to get Airbnb insurance. Some people do that as well. I know Proper has been the main company for a long time, so Proper Insurance. But I know that there are some competitors out there nowadays that are better than Proper. And might be something you want to consider. And that would be the type of insurance to protect your property specifically because of the Airbnb guests, which you would get on top of the insurance that you would have for the specific property if it were to like burn down. So they kind of go hand in hand. I don't know everything about insurance. I'm not going to try and explain every single last little detail. Talk to an insurance agent about it. Call them up. Again, just like you would do with everything else, call them up, figure out exactly what you could expect from the insurance there. And what's covered, what's not covered, and also things like flood insurance could be something that could be a case, and you want to make sure you understand what the insurance would be for those as well. Okay, moving forward, capital expenditure reserves. So if the roof needs to be replaced, if the AC goes out throughout the property, if anything on a larger scale breaks down for the property, you want to make sure that you have reserves put away for that. And you could start off with say like $10,000 depending on the size of the property. And then that $10,000 could get funded every single month from the money that's being made, and sort of maybe it always caps out at 20,000. So like you always have 20,000 in there, you never go below 20,000. And so as you need to pull into that fund to replace the roof, you then start rebuilding that fund with the cash flow that would be coming from the property. And so you're adding a monthly expense to the capex reserves as well. As you can see, we have quite a few reserves here because of all the unknowables that could potentially happen. And if the property still works with all these reserves, you still want to move forward with it, right? Now, additionally, there can be some HOA fees. And so the HOA fees would be something you need to consider as well. Some markets, most places if there is an HOA, so homeowners association, you're not going to be able to enter into that market. However, if there are no expense, sorry, I just thought of something as I explained that kind of like screwed up my thought here. What I'm trying to say is that most places that have an HOA are not going to allow you to do Airbnb, but there will be some places that do allow you to do it. And so you need to consider it in your expenses naturally because it's going to be one of your expenses. And then the PMI is going to be insurance on your actual mortgage if you need it. Okay. Again, you can figure that out from talking with a mortgage agent or looking that one up online and figuring out exactly what that would end up looking like depending on the state and location that you're going to be going into. So with all that being said, these are all the different expenses that you could expect with a Airbnb across the board, not including your own time that you're going to be putting into this, but that's definitely something you want to consider as well, because if you want to scale and you're trying to get past having to manage it yourself, then you might want to think about like hiring people and what that looks like, but that's going to be spread across multiple different properties. And the last one that I'll throw in here is property management / co-hosting. And so with this one, you would again just call up multiple different providers within the area, get an understanding of what they're charging. Is it 15%? Is it 30%? And then be able to figure out what that's going to cost you. Okay. Another one that you might want to think of too is moving the garbage bin from the back of the house to the road for them to pick it up. There's companies out there like called Can Monkey. I'll just put it down here. So it's called Can monkey, and sometimes you're gonna have to. You can hire these people depending on the market that they're in to actually move your bins back and forth so that the guest doesn't have it and you don't have to do it, and it can be taken care of from a distance. This right here, Can Monkey, is a great example as to why you would want to have reserves or maybe a placeholder account for things that you wouldn't have thought of that you would end up needing for that specific property or location. So again, with all that being said, those are all the expenses that you're going to inquire potentially, acquire, have. And so with all of that, make sure to look into this. I can't stress it enough. You have to make sure that you actually know your true numbers before actually getting started. And if you truly understand everything, then you will be doing a proper underwriting of that property before you get it. And you're not going to be missing a $10,000 expense like I did, which could be the vast majority of your profit. Okay. So hope this was very helpful. Again, you're going to have to do your own research to be able to get to the exact answer. And every single market's going to be a little bit different, but just use your Googling skills and figure it out. And I hope that was helpful. I'll see you guys in the next video. How's it going, everybody? So for this video, what I'm going to show you is a tutorial of Google Mind Maps. It's a tool that Google has that allows you to plot data within a map so you can see exactly where all of those listings are located. Now, this is a tool that is not 100% needed at all times, and the Profit Map software does have a mapping tool. However, there are scenarios where I do like to use this. I talk about it throughout the course when it will actually be useful to use. I just want to give a tutorial for you guys to understand how to use it if you ever do want to use it. All right. So as an example, right, like I said, Profit Maps does have its own tool, and you can go by zip codes, you can go by bedroom count, and you can even do by revenue size and be able to and see that data there. However, when you're going through data and you're going through, a lot of different listings, like you can see here, and we have all these different listings, there's going to be bad data in here at points in times. And so what the process that I teach you is going to teach you to clean up all of this data. And what ends up happening is you're left with a handful of data that you feel confident with, and you want to see where only these listings are actually located within the market that you're going to be going into. And so at this point, this is when I like to use my maps to be able to plot just that remaining good data and see exactly where it's located. And so once I've done that, I'm going to walk you through that process to understand how to do it. So you click that button up there that says create a map, right? And you can see it's an untitled map. It says this is the one layer you can see here, and it says to import. And so you click the import button, and then you always go to Google Drive because all of our profit maps are within Google Drive. And you would click the title. You go back to the one a profit map that you want to be in, and you copy that title, bring it back over to My Maps, and then you paste it in that section there and press enter. And that's going to actually give you the first one is always going to be the one that you're looking for because it's the best match. And then when you click that, you press insert, and then this pops up, right? It says choose columns to position your place marks. And it always is going to grab the lat and the long that's in the data. So when you're in the data, you can see here we have the lat and the long. And whenever you upload it to My Maps, it's automatically going to grab that for this first section. You don't need to touch anything else here, okay? So press continue. And then once you go to the next section, it says choose a column to title your markers. I always choose annual revenue because I want it to be the biggest number and I want to see that number over everything. And so I go, okay, sounds good, finish. And once it's done that, it's then going to show me all of those listings that are here, right? Now, for this scenario, I took all of Logan and I used the simple data and I'm showing every single listing, which obviously is not useful because I could just go to the Logan map on Profit Maps and be able to see that, right? So what you would do is say you've cleaned up the data, and what ends up happening is, only these listings are the ones that you want to see. So I'm going to copy that. What you have to do is you have to copy the data that you only want to see, and you have to make a new sheet, and you have to paste the data within that new sheet and bring that sheet to the very, very first one in the row of sheets, okay? Because when you pull from My Maps, it's only pulling from the very first sheet. Now, additionally, you can see I don't have any titles on any of this. And My Maps needs there to be titles so that it knows what each column means. What you do is you'd copy that, bring it over here, and you'd paste that in there as well if you needed to do that, okay? And now I have all the data that's the clean data, and it's got the titles, and it's within the very first section, and I can name this here if I wanted to. But essentially what I would do is I would then come back over here, and it says add layer. So I could click add layer. And when you do that, it gives me another option to, import. And when I click import, it's actually going to remember that I pulled from that same last location. So this one right here is going to be the one that we want. We want to click insert on that. Again, it's going to grab the lat and the long, so we don't need to have to worry about that first one. But the second one, we want to grab the annual revenue to be the title marker, right? And so we press finish, and then what you can see is it's plotted those pieces of data. Now the issue is that these are in blue and these are in blue, right? And you can see they kind of get highlighted as I hover over them. And so what you want to do, and sorry, they have the same title. So for this one, what I want to do is I want to rename this layer, and I'm going to say all Logan data, right? That way I know, oops, I had my cap lock on. So we want to go all, okay, sorry about that, guys. Let's do this one more time. Let's see, are we still in caps? No, we're not. Okay, so all Logan data, okay? And now I have that saved, and then this is going to just be, I'm going to rename this one to cleaned Logan data. And now I have these two set up, so I know which ones I'm looking at. Now, again, these ones are blue. They're all blue, both of them. And so what I would want to do is actually come to here, and you can see the little paint can that shows up. You click it, and you can change it to whatever color that you want. Now we can see the red dots compared to the blue dots, and we know where the clean data is. Now, typically, you're not going to put in all of the data, but you might have different scenarios. You might have 3 bedrooms compared to 4 bedrooms, and you want to have different colors for each one of these so you can distinguish the differences between the two when you're reviewing the data. You can see very clearly those ones are red and those ones are orange, right? Now, what if you only wanted to look at the clean data and not all the data? Well, with this little check mark here, you can click that and it's going to remove everything that isn't the cleaned data. Now, additionally, sometimes when you put this data in, it's going to come in what's called the individual style. So I don't know why it does it, but sometimes it does it. And it pops it in as individual style. And if you hover over these, you have to individually change each one of these dots to be whatever color you want them to all be. However, if you just click this one here, which says individual style, and change it to uniform style, you are going to get all of them to be the exact. You can change all of the colors at the exact same time, okay? Which is, I find to be very helpful. And again, that's something that just naturally happens, and I don't know why. So you can add as many layers as you want. You can title this whatever you want. And then you can also share it with people. So just like you can share a Google Sheet or a Google document, you can name it whatever you want, and then you can allow anyone with the link to view it. Or you can, you can share it on Drive. You can copy it. You can do all the typical things that you would regularly be able to do and give people access to be able to view this sheet as well. You can even click preview, which is going to allow you to see it in sort of this different mode where the data shows up on the left-hand side rather than in the mode that you were looking at it before, right? Which could be a little bit easier of a way to actually view the data. And so in a sense, this is all very straightforward stuff that you're going to be doing. And again, I use this as a way to just plot the good data that I have. And I'm usually doing it to compare different bedroom counts or homes with pools, without pools, and kind of get an understanding of where they're located within a market so I can actually figure out if location matters or not. Again, I go through all the details of this, of when to use it throughout the course. I bring it up. But I just want to make sure you had one good tutorial that you could go through if you needed to go through to be able to understand how to use Google My Maps. Okay, so I hope that's been helpful, and I'll see you in the next video. Everybody, this is going to be a raw/live video of me actually analyzing bad data in 3 different markets. So I'm going to choose 10 pieces of data from Chicago, Illinois, Rockbridge, Ohio, and then Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I'm going to just randomly select a location and go through the data so you can see the different scenarios that will arise as we're trying to confirm if data is good or bad. Okay, and this is a very natural process that I'm going to be going through. So this isn't, I have no idea what's going to happen essentially. So let's click into this one. We're going to do the first 10 that we see here. So that's going to bring us to this row right here. So we're going to go all the way to 79, and I'm just going to go one by one and confirm if it's good data or bad data. All right. Pretty straightforward process. Again, now, as you know, I click into the listing, and I right away I'm going to see, how many reviews has it received during that time frame. Right off the bat, this one's interesting because we have one for June. We have 2 for June, so nothing in July, and it's currently right now August 7th. So we definitely should have something for July. Sometimes when you don't have that very last month, so in other words, July, it's not that big of a deal because you could have the rest of the year and maybe they just missed something for this month. And that could be an okay thing in most scenarios. If you have every single month other than the last month that just happened, that is okay. All right. Um, Now June we have, May we only have one, then we go March. So we're missing April and we only have one. So we're now missing April and July and we only have one for May. So this is already not looking good at all. And then we have one for February, one for January, one for December. So right off the bat, I just know, as you can see, this is not believable data. And as you'll notice, like there's just not enough reviews over the entire year for us to believe it. Ideally, want to see, 2, 3, 4 reviews every single month, with potentially some less during the slow season, which would be January, February during this time frame. However, there's almost just no reviews all the way through this. So this is likely just a place that gets rented out part time. And that's why it's probably has some reviews every single month, but not a lot of reviews. And so therefore, this is not a property that I would trust. And this is a very easy no for me. One thing I'm going to point out is that most of the time, the top properties, the top like 3, 4, 5, tend to be bad data or hard to believe data. And then your bulk majority tends to be where you're going to get the most reliable data, because these ones will kind of be the outliers or bad data. It's usually how it goes. So let's just keep going though, one by one. This one is by Dustin. We've got July, July, July. That's great. June, June, June. May, May, April, April, March. We don't have any February, but that's okay because, again, February is going to be the slowest season of this entire month, or of Chicago. And I can already tell that there's a lot of reviews every other month. So I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. We have a couple in January, December, November, October, September. Not a ton during those time frames, but enough for me to feel confident with this, right? There's a review almost every single month. And most of the months do have more than 1 or 2 reviews. And so now we're back to July of 2022, which doesn't matter. We just want to go to the last month prior to that one before, because we started off in July, right? And so that's going to be our last 12 months. I believe this. And so what I would put here is yes. And if you really wanted to, you could add in here and say that there was, no reviews for February, but I personally would not. I just leave it as a yes, because I do actually feel pretty confident with that one. And then as we head to the next property, we have an Airbnb Plus, which doesn't mean much, but anyways, just pointed out. As we can see, we've got 5 for July already, a couple for June, May, April, and then we go straight to November. So this is a worst case scenario. We have a great amount of reviews prior to that, but we have nothing in the middle of the winter. Now you could look at this and go, hey, you know what? They obviously shut down their listing during the months of the winter months for this place. And so that's probably why there's no reviews, because there's a lot of reviews before and after that. And that likely is the case. But the issue is that their occupancy is actually only at 46%, which, if it's only at 46% and they were shut off during the winter months, that could be understandable, right? I mean, even these ones have low occupancy as well. And so this is why I wanted to do it live, because there's so many different scenarios that pop up. Now, typically, if they had higher occupancy, I would have automatically said no right off the bat. The reason being is because you don't have 80% occupancy and miss all of your winter months, because in that scenario you could have the algorithm screwing up and thinking they have bookings over the winter months, but in this scenario you don't, right? So they're showing really low occupancy about half the year. So what I'm going to say here is most likely, and just say no winter reviews, but low occupancy, right? And now, even when I see this, I'm actually noticing that this one only has 49% reviews as well. But but it still didn't have enough reviews for me to believe it, because the other one this one has 46%, and there's a ton of reviews in July and June and during those peak seasons. However, you could argue that it's missing all the middle months, and that's why the occupancy is so low, whereas this one is just like not getting a ton of bookings throughout the entire year. I still just don't fully believe it. I'm still not on board with this one, but I'm putting this one as a most likely, because it likely could be real with that occupancy being there. I hope that's making sense to everybody as I'm explaining it. But let's keep going on to the next one now. And this one, again, we got an Airbnb Plus. We have no July right off the bat, but we do have a good amount of June. We have 1 for May, a couple for April, and then we're right to December, and then November, and all the way into July. So this one is a very easy one to say no, because there just clearly isn't a lot of reviews every single month. And that one's at 60% occupancy. So again, that's a very clean and easy one. Just to point out and highlight, we're missing August, we only have one for September, one for November, one for December, or a couple for December, but we also have no January, February, or March. So this is a very obviously bad piece of data where the host is not renting it out full time, just part time, and that's why they're getting some bookings some months and not bookings all the months. But the algorithm thinks they're booked out full time, and that's why it's showing up as $114,000 a year. Okay. Now the next one that we have here is this one here. So let's go right there. We've got July, and we're into June. So this is actually looking really good. They're reviewing as well, which is making it look like there's more reviews than there actually is. That one actually still tricks me. So make sure you're really paying attention to that. We have nothing for February, but again, this is a similar scenario where we're okay with nothing for February, but they also have nothing for January or December, sorry. So that kind of makes me a little bit iffy, but I'm not saying for a fact that this is not good data because there's so many reviews in every other month. So in this one, what I would likely do is say yes, and then just say missing December and February, right? So I'd say yes, but I'm marking the fact that they are missing these just so I can keep track of this. And if I really wanted to, I could say most likely. But the reality is that they had so many bookings here that it looked they had so many reviews in every other month that for them to miss those two wasn't that big of a deal. And the reality is let's say hypothetically this was booked out by the owner during that time frame. That's not that big of a deal because they have bookings every other month, and those aren't really peak months either. So it's not really going to be changing their revenue all that much in comparison. And then on top of that, we will be reviewing everybody else. And if their listing looks like it's making it significantly more than everybody else, then it won't make logical sense. Then we can remove it at that point. But for the most part, it's making sense to me. So we've got August, we have no July, but we go straight to June, we go straight to March, and then straight to November and all the way back to August. So this is one of my favorite easy ones because you can see a full year's worth of reviews in one screenshot. And we obviously know that's not good data. So we're going to go no on that one as well. And then we can just keep going. And then what do we have over here? So another Airbnb Plus. I don't know why I keep pointing that out. Bunch of June, bunch of July. And then as we continue, May, April, March, February, December, November. This is good data. This is very good data. So I love this. That's nice and easy, super believable. Sometimes you'll get a listing that you like really, really believe, and you almost want to mark off like great piece of data or something. Okay, so July, June, May, April, March. Okay, this is also looking really good. February, January, December, November. You're going to learn how to read the months backwards. Be able to say them backwards. I don't even know if I could actually do it, but most likely could after how many times I've done that. So that one looks good as well. Right, we're like, yep, that's good. Mark that as a yes. And we got a couple more here that we got to do. See if there's any more scenarios before we move into a different kind of market that will tend to have a different kind of reviews. So we have no July again, but we have a couple June, couple May, March, no April. We're missing January and February, and we're missing November, and we only have one. So I'm not going to trust this. There's just not enough reviews every single month, and there's quite a few months missing. So we're going to go with a no on that one. It's pretty easy for this, right? And then we got our last one that we're going to do here. And when we open this up, already doesn't look like a very good listing, but we got a good amount of reviews. So July, June, May, April, March, and then we're still going. And then we go March to November. So this one right here, okay, this is what happens. I'm actually really happy this popped up because look at this last listing. Actually, that's bad data. Look at this listing, okay? Look, the design, the photos aren't really all that great, but like the design is actually pretty well put together. The listing itself actually really isn't that great of a listing. Now that it has a better design, this one is much nicer. I guess what I'm trying to say is that this listing looks a lot worse at first glance. Like at first glance, the design's really bad. It's really old. It's the photos are worse. But I mean, even the last one right here, the photos are not much better in all reality. But regardless, I guess what I'm trying to say is that sometimes you're going to look at a listing where the photos themselves, it looks like a bad listing. It doesn't really add up with the pattern of all the other homes you've been looking at. And it's almost obvious that it's bad data. Like even this one is fairly boring as well, but it's not, in my opinion, not as bad as this. And so to me, I would just look at this and be like, it's most likely not going to be accurate. And then when I see the data doesn't have a great amount of reviews every single month, so it has some for July, some for June. I know I already did this, but I'm just triple checking here. Oh yeah, because this scenario went straight from March to November. So again, this could be the same sort of situation where we have no bookings over the winter, but it has 85% occupancy. This is what I was looking for before with this one up here. But you can't have 85% occupancy and have no reviews over the winter, and so that's an easy no. So see how I kind of had to. I went through a couple of different things there, like the photos themselves. Does it look like a listing that would actually be keeping up with the ones around it? What I really should have done is just check the occupancy right away, and I would have known for a fact it was not good data because again, you don't get 85% occupancy without having reviews throughout the entire winter. And so, anyways, that's an easy no. And again, you come here, you go like this, you click that, and you go get rid of all the blanks, get rid of all the no's, and now you're just left with the good data that is remaining. Now, obviously, we didn't go through all these, so we still have a ton of data that we need to go through, but we did get rid of one. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So half was good, half was bad because we went through 10 listings there. Okay, so that's the Chicago good and bad data and sorting through it. Let's now get into Rockbridge, Ohio. And for this one, what I'll do is I'll focus on the 3 bedrooms. I'm just randomly selecting here, guys. There's no pattern behind this. And we're going to go through these. And so very first one we have here is an absolutely beautiful listing, 407 reviews. I've actually made videos about this one. And this one's going to be really easy where you can see there's going to be a ton of reviews. July, April, March. This is a type of home that is built very specifically to be a full-time Airbnb. There's no other use for it. And so obviously we're going to have a ton of reviews, which makes this super, super believable. And so we can write in yes there, right? And then the next one, I'm almost positive is going to be the same host. Nope, it's not. Okay, I take that back. Anyway, so July and then June, May. Ooh, look at that. So we go February, March, no April, couple of May, one for June, and then a bunch for July. So there's actually not that many in this scenario right now, which is interesting. And then we go from January to November. So I don't know if I want to believe this. And then we go from November to September. Okay, so I'm going to say no on this one for those reasons, everything that I just mentioned there. And then it also says it has 100% occupancy, which we can very clearly see it doesn't have that many reviews, especially when the last one had way more reviews in it. Okay, so now this one's super easy. We can see November of 2022. Make sure you're always checking the year as well, because sometimes what you'll do is it'll say like July of 2022, July of 2022, and it'll be a full year's worth of data missing, but it's like this exact month. It like lined up with the same month. And so make sure you're always checking the reviews, the year, to ensure you're looking at the right year. So this is a very easy no. We can move forward with that one. Let's get to the next one here, which is doing 105 apparently, and take a look. So we got August, July. This is good to see. July, June, May, April. One thing I want to point out is, some people have had August, other people have not. We're a week into August. It's not a big deal if nobody has a review for like the first 2 weeks or even 3 weeks of August, because there is a lag time for when people can review. And sometimes people just take their time to review, and sometimes you have a longer guest in there. There could be reasons why somebody would not have a review, midway through that month, just as a heads up, okay? And then July, and then June, May, April, March, February, January. This is pretty straightforward, really easy. December, we can see they've got a ton of reviews all the way through, all the way to the end of the year. So, yep, that's going to be good data. So we can put that in as a yes, and then move on to the next one. And again, we're going to be doing the same thing. June, straight, so no July. Now, when there's no July, again, I've already kind of mentioned this. I don't love it, but it's not the end of the world. We do have June, May, April. This is kind of spotty. We're not seeing a lot of reviews here. March, and then we're missing February. We go right to January. We're missing December and November. We go to October. And then we got one for September, one for August, one for July. I don't believe this data. There's not enough reviews every single month. There's too many months missing. Like even just having one review for a month, I don't love in the first place. And then they have many of those where there's like quite a few where it's just the one review. And then on top of that, there's quite a few months missing as well. So for me, I'm just going to say no. I don't really care. It's not good data. It is what it is. Keep moving on. This is a dead link. So this happens. It is what it is. We try and get rid of as many of these dead links as we can, but people will change up their listing on any given day whenever they want. And so we can't really do too much about that. So the next one here, we've got a couple of July, June, May, April, March, February, January, December, November, October. I like this. This looks good to me. So I'm going to mark that as a yes. One thing I'm going to point out again about this last one is that somebody can, pause their listing for any reason, construction, an issue happened, whatever it may be, and they've just decided to pause their listing for that time period, or Airbnb banned them, or they've taken it down for some reason, and all of a sudden the link no longer works. We still have the data, but we don't have the link, and it's not good data because we can't actually see what the home looks like to be able to review it. So we just have to say, nope, not good data. Okay. And then moving forward, we're going to check this next one. So January of 2023 to October all the way to July. So that's a super easy no because we are in August of 2023 and their newest one is in July or January. Anyways, keep going. We got this one here, June, April, February. That's an easy no as well, right? That's an easy no. And that's going to be, and we got one last one we want to do here. Let's go click into this. We got July, June, May, April. Yep. Okay, it's quite a bit more in May than I was expecting. January, December, November, October. So this looks good to me as well across the board. Good amount of reviews. Not a crazy amount, but a good amount. And so I'm happy about that. We're going to say yes. I don't like that it has 91% occupancy. So I want to almost highlight that to be a little bit worried about it. Be like, hey, why does that have so much occupancy? If there is something wrong with this one, that could be why. Because it had a good amount of reviews, but not 91% occupancy enough. And so what we're going to do now, again, you can just come here, click this, click that, get rid of no, get rid of the blanks. Then all of a sudden you're looking at just the good data, right? So only 4 out of the 10 were actually good data, with this one making me a little bit nervous. The other thing that I want to mention here with this one is there were a couple of properties that were kind of on the edge where they could have been good, but wasn't certain that they were good. And what I could have done was check VRBO, because this would be a market that's going to be a smaller market that could have more VRBO listings than Airbnb listings. And so, some of these, like even this one here, it had a good amount of reviews, but I could have checked it on VRBO just to confirm. Some of the ones that have no one here were very obvious that they weren't good, but some of them, again, could have been a check VRBO. Okay. And it's really not that complicated. You just figure out where they are on the map. So you go down here, you figure out where they are on the map. Then you figure out the bedrooms and bathrooms. You add those filters into VRBO, zoom into it, and you'll be able to find the property because it'll have the same general first photo. Okay. So really straightforward there. That's everything for a small remote kind of location. Again, there wasn't any that I was strongly feeling like it should be VRBO, but in some scenarios you could do that. Okay. Now let's go to Fort Lauderdale. Let's choose a random bedroom count. Let's actually do some smaller units here. So we're going to do 1 bedrooms. I'll click into this and we'll go through these ones. First one right off the bat, link did not open up. So we go no. And we move on to the next one is what it is. We got 25 reviews. So it's right on the edge. June right to September. So that's a super easy one to also say no. Again, we try to vet out these listings, but there's just nothing you can do about it. And we are going to continually work to make that better, but this is just where we're at right now. So we got no July again, but we have June, May, April, February. I don't like that. No March, and also no January or December. And we have 1 November, 1 September, and then we're all the way over to March. So we're going to say no on that one. So we got 3 no's right off the bat. And then let's keep going and see what we get. So we got July, June, May. Don't love only 2 in June and July, especially for a Florida market. April, March, that's pretty decent. January, February, it's not bad. December, November, October, and then we have nothing after October. So what I would want to see is this one been rented out for, says 335 days, so there should be a month missing worth of data. But in this case, we're actually missing September and August. Most likely just September, actually. So this is okay. This is believable because it's been only tracked for 335 days. We're midway through August, which means it would just be the month of September and part of August that wouldn't be showing up. And so as you can see, this listing looks like it was paused for a time frame and then restarted here in October and has been going steady since October. So this is a really rare scenario, but for the most part, it's straightforward. It makes sense. And this is a believable piece of data, in my opinion. So I'm going to say yes. I know that this one might be a little bit tricky where you could put most likely, but I'm going to put yes because of everything that I just explained. And then we'll move on to the next one. So for this one here, looks like good just from the photos. So a good amount of July, a good amount of June. We got a good amount of April, March, and May, straight to February, January, December. And then it goes December to September. Ah, that's tough. That is tough. We have 2 Decembers and we have 1 September. Let's see. Is this one also a no? That's a 365. I'm gonna put it's got 92% occupancy. What we're gonna say here is maybe I'm gonna say most likely because it's uh every single month is good other than the last two. So what are the 2 months that we're missing here? We're missing October and November. Only 2 months. So missing Oc and Nov. And then again, I can make that judgment later. If this doesn't seem to add up with the rest of the data, then I can go there and figure out likely why that is, right? Like that could be why. And then it makes it easier to be able to move forward. Again, this we've already seen this. I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but we saw this same layout, which means it would be the same host. I think it was from this one here. Yeah, so same host, same sort of layout. So it's likely that this is not going to be good data, but we'll go into it and take a look. We go straight to March and then all the way to 2022. And so therefore that's not good data either. We're going to go no, and then we're going to keep going, right? Okay, July, that looks good. June, May, April, March, December. This looks really good. November, tons and tons of reviews. I can honestly, when I first saw these photos, it's so clean, so well put together. It's just like it's going to be good data. I don't know how to, I don't know how to explain it, but sometimes I can just tell. I've seen it so many times. But what's interesting is how many bad pieces of data were the top pieces. And keep in mind, we've gotten rid of so many pieces of bad data already that there's still quite a bit that's showing up there as bad data. This is the same host, Gabby. You can see Gabby again right there, and it's got a ton of reviews. So it's likely that this one's also going to be accurate. But then again, you've always got to triple check. You can't just rely on the fact because a host can have one home that's going really well, and another one that gets all screwed up, and then the data gets screwed up, and it is what it is. But this one is not that case. You can very clearly see that there's a review every single month, so that's going to be a good piece of data. And it's the same host both times, so you know that she's doing a good job. And if you can do as well as her, that would be even more beneficial. So we've got June, only one in June. We got a couple in April, May, couple in April, March, February, January, and then we go straight to November of 2021 from 2022. And that's actually 2022 data. See, I told you, pay attention to those years because sometimes they can screw you up, right? So April to April, that really threw me off. That looked like it was perfectly fine, but that is not good data at all. And then we got our last one here that we're going to go through, which will be let's see. So we got July, and then we're missing June. We only have one for May. We have a couple in April, actually few in April, few in March, few in February, January, December, November, October. So this is looking good. We're missing September, which is annoying. Missing September, and we're also missing June, and then there's only one review for May. So I'm going to say for this one, it's going to be a most likely. I'm going to put that we're missing June and September, and then one in May. Not that I really need to put that there, but I feel good about the data because there's so many reviews on some of the months, right? Like April's got a 4, March has 4, February has 3, but then like you get January and December both have 1, and then November kicks in. So it's almost like this person has a lot, then a little, then a lot, then a little, and I don't know what's going on with that. So I'm going to say most likely rather than 100%. And that's our 10 for Fort Lauderdale. And what I'll do again is remove all of these. And what you can see is we're actually left with 5, with 2 of them being most likely. I definitely thought there was going to be less than 5, but the first grouping were all bad data, right? So you really want to. Did they all come back? Let me see. Yeah, so there you go. We got 3 in a row that were bad, and then we started getting a little bit better, but not the greatest. So this big grouping of data here, honestly, is not that great, but that's why we go through this process of analyzing good data and bad data and getting rid of each one of these different things. I'm glad I did this live raw analysis because there's so many different little scenarios that do pop up. And I hope that by going through this, you saw a lot of those in this scenario, and that helps you feel a little bit better about how I'm actually analyzing good and bad data. How many reviews is actually enough reviews? It's never a perfect formula, but essentially you're trying to make sure that there's at least 2 to 3 every single month. That's where you feel the most comfortable. but sometimes there's going to be 1 month missing. Sometimes there's only going to be one review for a month, and other times you're going to have 5 to 10 every single, maybe not 10, but 5 reviews every single month, and it's going to feel great, and it's going to be super easy to know that that's good data. Anyways, with that all being said, just one last thing I want to point out here is when you do go through all this, and if there is anything you're uncertain about, when you do analyze it all together, you will be able to find a pattern as to why one home's making more than the other, and there'll be some outliers in here that don't make sense, and you'll have to remove that data as you continue to go on. Okay, just want to kind of continue to point that out because it is going to happen. It's going to screw you up a lot, and that's probably the one thing people are going to ask me the most questions about. So I want to make sure that you understand that that does happen. Okay, so that's everything for this video of cleaning data live. I hope that this has been helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.